Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping away from our daily routines to unpack what is literally one of history's largest, most catastrophic hacks. Now, think about the hospitality industry for a second. It's built entirely on this illusion of perfect comfort and absolute trust, right? You walk into a high-end hotel expecting crisp white sheets, a smiling concierge, complete privacy. You hand over your credit card, you hand over your passport, and you probably don't even think twice about it. But beneath those shiny lobby floor tiles and right behind those reservation desks, there is a massive invisible digital backbone. And today, we're going to look at exactly what happens when that digital foundation completely cracks. We're diving deep into a monumental IT failure that sent shockwaves through the corporate world. We'll be checking out the data, the timeline, and the very real consequences of neglecting digital infrastructure. It's honestly a cinematic story of corporate ambition, invisible threats, and a silent break-in that went on for years. So let's jump right in.
500 million. Just take a second and really let the sheer crushing weight of that number sink in. When we try to picture a data breach, we usually imagine, a compromised email account or maybe a spreadsheet accidentally left unsecured on some random server. But 500 million? That's not just a simple slip-up. That's roughly the entire population of North America, just swept up in a single colossal digital catastrophe. And the craziest part, we're not just talking about a giant list of spam email addresses here. We're talking about 500 million individual human profiles. Think about everything that goes into booking a hotel room, your physical home address, your travel itineraries, mapping out exactly where you're going to be and when, credit card details, and for millions of those folks, unencrypted passport numbers. Basically, the literal digital keys to 500 million lives completely laid bare.
Section 1. The 500 million guest disaster.
Hollywood movies have totally conditioned us to expect cyber attacks to look a really specific way. We expect this sudden, loud smash and grab. Red lights flashing everywhere, sirens blaring in some dark server room, a progress bar ticking up to 100% while a hacker in a hoodie frantically smashes their keyboard. But that's just not reality. And it is definitely not what happened here. This was a massive exposure hidden right in plain sight. And this brings us to a frankly terrifying concept in cybersecurity called dwell time. That's the amount of time an attacker gets to spend operating freely inside a network before anyone even realizes they're there. See, 500 million records weren't just stolen overnight. The attackers were essentially walking the digital halls of this hotel empire for years. They weren't just grabbing data and running. They were living inside the network, monitoring traffic, mapping out the digital floor plan, bumping up their own access privileges, and just taking whatever they wanted, completely undisturbed. The digital security alarms? Completely silent. It's this agonizingly prolonged, undetectable nature of the exposure that really transforms this from your standard run-of-the-mill hack into a systemic, total disaster.
Section 2. The Starwood acquisition trap. So, to really understand how hackers can just live inside a global corporation's network completely undetected, imagine you're buying this breathtaking multi-million-dollar mansion, right? It's got marble floors, a sprawling estate, incredible views. You buy it, you move all your stuff in, and you pop some champagne to celebrate. But what you didn't do was check the foundation for termites. Back in 2016, Marriott's massive acquisition of Starwood hotels was exactly that. Up in the boardroom, it was this highly celebrated, massive business expansion. It was all about growth, market dominance, synergy. Like I said, the champagne was popping. But down in the server room, it was a totally different story. Because along with the physical hotel properties, the luxury branding, and that massive guest list, Marriott accidentally imported a fatal flaw. They brought Starwood's rotting, outdated legacy IT systems directly into their own expanding empire. And unbeknownst to literally anyone at Marriott, those legacy systems were already compromised. They harbored a pre-existing breach. It was essentially the ultimate digital Trojan horse. The sheer excitement of this massive business expansion entirely overshadowed the incredibly dire reality of the technology they were inheriting.
Section 3. 4 years in the shadows.
Okay, this timeline is where the true nightmare of IT neglect is really mapped out for us. Look at the very beginning here, pre-2016. The initial Starwood intrusion actually happens before Marriott even enters the picture. The locks on Starwood's legacy systems were already broken. Then we hit 2016, the mega merger. Marriott signs the papers, they take on Starwood's properties, and crucially, this is the big one. They physically and digitally connect Starwood's compromised network right into their own infrastructure. They essentially hardwired the hackers directly into their own house. And then comes this agonizing gap between that merger and the 2018 breach discovery.
For 4 full years from the initial intrusion, malicious actors just operated inside the network. Now, you might be wondering, how on earth does a hacker stay hidden for 4 years? Well, by moving laterally, by quietly escalating their administrative privileges over time, by carefully masking their data extraction to look like completely normal everyday network traffic. Think about the human element here for a second. Every single day for 4 years, thousands of families, business travelers, and tourists checked into these hotels. They handed over their credit cards and passports, completely trusting their data was safe. And for 4 years, the hackers were right there in the system with them, basically sipping virtual coffee and watching the whole thing happen. This isn't just an oops moment, guys. It's a map of profound systemic IT neglect.
Section 4. Fines and Fractured Trust. $123 million. When the shadows finally lifted, this was the immediate shockwave. This absolutely staggering fine was slapped on them by the UK's Information Commissioner's Office under the GDPR, that's the General Data Protection Regulation. And this is an absolutely crucial insight to understand about modern business. This fine, it was one of the very first massive flexes of the GDPR. It signaled a brand new era of regulatory enforcement. Regulators basically looked at the exact timeline we just walked through. They saw the total failure to audit and secure those inherited legacy systems, and they sent a booming 9-figure message to the entire corporate world. And that message was, ignorance is not an excuse. Saying, well, we inherited this broken system is not an excuse. If you buy the data, you buy the responsibility to protect it, period. But look, a fine is really just a check you write. The true cost of this failure goes so much deeper. Ask yourself this. How do you feel handing your passport and your primary credit card to a smiling front desk clerk, knowing for a fact that the back-end systems processing that information might literally be a decade out of date and completely compromised? The long-term erosion of consumer trust is a wound that takes years, sometimes decades, to heal. Marriott found themselves in a massive reputation crisis because corporate accountability was just completely shattered. They promised hospitality, they promised safety, and on the digital front, they delivered a historic disaster. The devastating failure to secure those legacy systems didn't just cost them $123 million. It cost them the fundamental trust of the public.
Section 5. Mandatory digital due diligence. Which brings us to the ultimate, most actionable takeaway from this entire explainer. Digital due diligence. Historically, when two massive companies merged, the executives focused almost entirely on financial due diligence, right? They looked at legal liabilities, market share, revenue projections. IT integration was so often just treated as an afterthought, like, oh, that's a problem for the IT guys to figure out later. Well, the Marriott-Starwood disaster proved once and for all that if you do not relentlessly audit the digital infrastructure you are acquiring, you might literally be buying a disaster. And digital due diligence is not just glancing at a spreadsheet of servers. It requires active, aggressive penetration testing. It means conducting deep code audits. It means actually implementing zero-trust security frameworks before the ink ever dries on a merger contract. Had rigorous, active digital due diligence been performed back in 2016, those rotting legacy systems would have been flagged instantly, the pre-existing breach would have been discovered, and the entire 2018 disaster, it simply never would have happened. As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with this final, genuinely provocative thought. When companies merge, whose security are you really trusting? The next time you hear about a massive corporate merger, some multi-billion-dollar acquisition making headlines on the news, remember this analysis. Remember the 500 million exposed records. Think about the legacy systems that might be operating silently in the background and ask yourself, is this new, larger company actually secure? Or did they just inherit a crisis that's waiting to be discovered? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the true cost of IT neglect. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.